Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Wednesday. This is January 26th. We are again joined by Jay Townley from HPS. He is here to present a super webinar around the 2021 Consumer Research that we just completed. This is number 2 of a 4-part educational series. Welcome, Jay. Thank you for joining us.
Well, welcome to everybody. I hope you're warmer than I am in sunny Wisconsin, where the temperature just went up to 2. But I guess it's cold in Heather's part of the country too, and Rochelle is enjoying the sunshine state in California. So as Heather said, this is the second in a series specifically dedicated to the 2021 Consumer Research Report that the NBDA sponsored and brought to market. This second webinar is going to touch on pieces of the research that were published on the 18th of January, just as Sports Market Surveys was closing their work and getting the supplier or the general supplier report, as opposed to the sponsors report, ready for the market. This is all from the consumer research that the NBDA had the foresight to sponsor and do the research at the very end of 2021. Its purpose is specifically to look at the American adult cyclists during the pandemic in the years 2020 and 2021 to create strategies and to plan for the future, including this year. So there's a great deal. This is a very, very broad scope report. I certainly hope that the folks that have received it are aware of the scope. I am working diligently on the V2 of the specialty bike retailer or bike shop report, and hope to have it all wrapped up before we do the next session in our series, which I think generally agreed will be open to everybody that is interested in the report on February 2nd. If you have inquiries, though, please contact the NBDA at nbda.com or go to the website, and you will find the consumer research reports posted with descriptions. Now, the agenda for today is focused on the bike shop version of the report. I'll show you where that fits in. And specifically, what we're doing at this point is looking carefully at the introduction to the report so you understand from where it comes. The methodology behind the research, and I don't spend a lot of time on that, but I know there are people in the audience that'd be interested and concerned about that. Demographics are a key issue for all of us, and it's a key issue that we should be spending our time on to make sure that we are aware as planners and the bike shop owners as developing their own strategies are aware of. The product categories is the new piece that was added in the last 2 weeks as it was completed for the supplier report, is now being worked down, consolidated, and analyzed for the bike shop report. Segmentation was completed prior to the product categories, but the 3 pieces of the overall national view of the American cycling consumer in the last 2 years, the product categories where the most is, including e-bikes, by the way, as you'll see, and then segmentation, the 5 segments, and where you could see the spend, and you could see where the consumer is from a aging or demographic standpoint and an income standpoint. And then we'll go back and take a look at the educational series that we're in right now, and how that will wrap up over the next 2 sessions in February, a general summary, and then we'll go to a Q&A session. So, part and parcel of the introduction are the key insights. So what are the key insights that this report went after? And they are broad, and they cover the spectrum of everything that we should be interested in and concerned about relative to the American consumer during the last 2 years, during the pandemic. What are the key cyclist segments in today's market? How do these segments buy? How do they interact with IBDs? How, and also all the other segments, by the way, of retail. How have buying channels changed? What channels are the most important to each segment? How have bicycle buying habits changed? Will the changes be long-term? And how can we take advantage of the changes, both short-term and long-term? How do we do the planning? In the new cyclist segment, we've got some very significant guides, and we want to see how big each of the new cyclist segments are, and what's their long-term potential, or are they short-lived? What are the most important buying factors in each of the segments? And how does the brands from the supplier standpoint, but more importantly from a retailer standpoint, your store is the brand. So how is your brand performing in each segment? And what messages resonate with each segment, which is what we're looking at here as how a bike shop in a neighborhood or in a particular part of a metro market can deliver their message for their brand to this new consumer. So what messages resonate with each segment, and how do you reach them, which we get into in the strategic portion of the dealer report. Now, this represents an introduction, but it represents the three types of reports that at this point are available from the NBDA. And to the far right is the sponsors report, which has already been sent out to the companies that had the foresight to join with the NBDA and also provide their sponsorship to bring this to the whole of the industry. The brand reports, which are currently available in two types. Now, it's the same report available to all suppliers for $5,000. And this is an extensive report. It's hundreds of pages. For the associate members of the NBDA, those suppliers that are associate members of the NBDA, the same report's available at $4,500. So a nice substantial increase for NBDA membership. And then lastly, off to the left is the NBDA member report. And this is for the NBDA retail members. The first version has gone out and is available. It'll be supplemented, a lot of it in material that was put together for this webinar, but it'll be supplemented shortly in a V2, and will probably be added to as we get into answering questions over time as more dealers look at this report, more dealers use it for strategic planning, and more dealers are giving us feedback that we can in turn put into a V3. So that doesn't mean that there's not another version in the wind, but it's going to be a little longer. The V2 will be the big change, be probably double the size of what those of you that received the report, the dealer report, received over the last couple of weeks. So the methodology. And what I'm going to do is also see if I can get rid of my video here, which may be distracting. But meanwhile, the methodology that Sports Market Surveys used, and they're one of the largest survey firms in the world. They're headquartered in London. They have an international standing. They do look at cycling throughout the European countries and of course North America. And they did 2,500 interviews is what they call, and these are actually online surveys with adults in the United States. So for dealers that have asked, does this include Europe? Nope, it's just the USA. It nationally is representative of all adult cyclists. So it takes into account new bikes, used bikes, e-bikes, so-called acoustic bikes and electric are all included by age, gender, income, region, and more relative to the demographics and also attitudes, the trends, the motivations, why they bought, why they ride, what they are getting from it, what they intend going into the future. The field work was completed in November. So this is fresh, it's current. And we're just about at the end of January, and it's completed as I say, the supplier reports are available. All the data and information is available. We're wrapping up. We got one version of the bike shop report out in the market. We're wrapping that up with a supplement, the V2, within days. Now, one of the things that, and again, among bike shops over my years of experience, I find that we've got some well-educated people out there. Some of you folks are PhDs. Some of you are actually professional researchers, I have found. But you're very interested in, when research like this is tabled, this is primary consumer research, what's the confidence interval? In other words, what's the accuracy? Now, this sample of 2,500 has a confidence interval of up to plus minus 2%. So there's a brief explanation of that, but basically what it says is that it's a very high confidence level. Part of that is because the NBDA had the foresight in working with sports market surveys to make sure that they got 2,500 complete, statistically balanced for the adult population in the United States. So if you want to dig more into this, you can. Keith Storey is going to be with us for the last in these educational sessions in late February. He is the primary researcher, but you certainly can query any of us and we'll get you detail about the confidence interval, or if you will, the accuracy of this survey. Now, we are interested in determining what demographics really mean to bike shops, and making sure that the bike shop community understands that there is an important piece here. Demographics are essential to what bike shops are doing, in our opinion. I've been writing about this for years. I've been doing research work, interpreting, doing analysis, but demographics are the statistical characteristics of the whole of the human population. In this particular case, the demographics of bicycle purchasers and users is extremely important when you work it down to the individual shop level. It deals with the age, the gender, the income, the ethnicity. It gets into more, how many children in the household. It gives you a real profile and picture of the consumer that is using bicycle and e-bike products. So you could use this information to identify your market on, as I said, a neighborhood level. All you need to do as a specialty bike retailer is go to your local library or to your municipality and dig out from them the demographics for your town, for your community, for your county, because that data is available. If you could look nowhere else, go to your county seat. And the county government will have the demographics on the county you live in, but certainly you'll be able to find that for any large or mid-sized city, and be able to look at it over a period of time and match it up to the demographics we're about to talk about. So of all of the pieces that are in the supplier report and going into the dealer report, product categories is the latest to be finished and put into all of the versions by first sports market surveys, and then what I'm working on behalf of NBDA on the Human Powered Solutions piece of this, which is to analyze this and boil it down for specialty bike retailers. The three product segments with the highest number of adult cyclists were road cyclists, mountain cyclists, off-road, and e-bike cyclists in all types of product. So these are the three that when you look at the report, you'll see that every category of cyclist is enumerated and called out up to 2% of participation. However, these are the three largest segments of the adult bicycle riding population in the United States. So these are the three that have been analyzed independently, about 30 pages of detailed consumer research analysis on the part of sports market surveys for each one of these. And these are the three that we're boiling down and incorporating into what we've already done in the first part of the NBDA bike shop version of this report. So road cyclists. over 60% of road, now these are overviews, by the way. This is not end all. This is simply to give you a flavor for each of these categories. Over 60% of road cyclists are male, 63.3%. Relatively high, but you'll see that overall American adult cyclists skew to male as opposed to female, as we'll see. The mean age, the average, when we say mean, we mean average. And so it's not the median, it's the average. The mean age is 39. So half of all road cyclists are between the ages of 25 and 44. We find that significant because this falls into the whole of the millennial generation and up to the middle of Generation X. These represent very important segments of the American consumer population. They are large as well, with the millennials actually representing now the largest segment of adults in the United States. The average household income of road cyclists is $99,000 per year. Now that's household, but at $99,000, you'll see that's well above the national average. 61.4% of road cyclists have a college degree or higher. We look at education because education, in effect, from a demographer standpoint, begets income. The higher the educational attainment, the higher the incomes as a general rule. The majority of road cyclists, 80.5%, are Caucasian or white. This, from an ethnicity standpoint, is both large, high penetration, well above, as you'll see, the national numbers and index, but also represents an opportunity relative to the other sectors of the consumer economy. And then lastly, just for the suppliers and the associate members, the supplier version of this report, as I said, it's over 150 pages, contains 30 pages of data and information on road cyclists alone. Now, what we do for the specialty bike retailer, for the NBDA member, and for the bike shops that buy the report, and to clarify it, by the way, the NBDA member price for the bike shop report is $399, and that'll include all versions as this is supplemented. The non-NBDA member bike shop could purchase this report for $699. We urge you for the difference to join the NBDA. Now, what I'm showing you here are tables that are contained just in the analysis in the dealer report. These are not pulled from the supplier side. So we start with gender. And what we're showing here is for adult road cyclists in 2020, 2021, 63.3% were male, as opposed to 48.9% of the US population, or an over-index of 14.4%. Correspondingly, adult women were 36.2% of road cyclists. We consider this to be not only low, but also a huge opportunity, particularly for the specialty bike retail channel and trade, but for the bike business overall. Because the US population of adult women is 51.1%, slightly larger than male, so it's under-indexed by almost 15%. Now, what this other chart shows that we do put into the reports is simply comparing what you just saw in the adult road cyclist percentage, male, female, against the adults in the total study, all adults that were in the 2,500, and then off to the right is that percent US population again. What we're showing here is, again, it's over-indexed compared to all cyclists. Road cyclists skew more male and less female. And again, important because strategically there's a huge opportunity. The American bicycle business in total undersells women of all ages, females of all ages, and in turn has to correct a few things in order to become more attractive to women. And we're going to see some of the nuances of that as we move forward. There's more of it that gets into the detail of the report. For road cyclists, this is the percentages by age groups. And again, the percent of adult road cyclists 18 and older, along with the average age, which is 39, percent of the US population, and then the variance or the over or under indexing of road cyclists compared to the US population. And so what we look at quickly because of time is the largest over indexes are 25 to 34, 35 to 44. This falls into the millennials and the Gen Xers. And look at these over indexes, they're over 10% each. The under index over 11% is 65 plus. Again, this might be an opportunity, but as you'll see when we get into categorization, this particular segment is aging out. While it's an opportunity for many types of product and to sell bicycle product and e-bike product into the market, and certainly gives us plenty of room with this under index, it also doesn't spend a lot in our activity anymore. And speaking of spending, here are the incomes broken into categories. The adult cyclist, road cyclist in 2021, the mean is 98,900 as we referenced. For US population, that mean is 63,214, again, household income. The indexes, the adult road cyclist under indexes all age groups and is grossly over indexed in one of the best that income groups that it can be over indexed in. It's 17% above the national numbers in 100,000 plus household income. So the average is $35,700 above. So the bicycle business in total, from Walmart to the direct sellers to the best bike shops in the world, in the United States, are fortunate in that cycling is an activity of the upper income portion of the US population. Is shown in the second chart, where we show the adult road cyclists, the adult bicycle and e-bike rider. This is the total population of cyclists, and then against the US population. And you'll see, again, compared to the US population, 63,200 average household income, 88.9 or $88,960 for all adult cyclists over the last 2 years, and road cyclists at 98,900 average, well over indexed. College education, as I said, college education or educational attainment begets income. So it's of very great importance in looking at the demographics of cyclists. And for the data available, we can look at the college graduate and the postgraduates, or those in postgraduate studies or holding up to a PhD for road cyclists or all categories, and see that college graduates within the road cycling community are 32%. The postgraduates or the postgrads that hold either masters or PhDs or more are 29%. The combination in the US population of both is 33.4% and over index at 28%, which partially explains the income level, but also provides an opportunity for where do you market, and additionally, where can you market? And then the combination chart shows the comparisons where that over index sticks out, but still for all adult cyclists, this is a high index area. Ethnicity. For road cyclists, I mentioned it's way over index at 80.5% of road cyclists are white or Caucasian. For all cyclists, it's 78.7%. This is against the US population of 60.1%. The African-American population is fairly close to index or to the representative population. The Hispanic Latino population is well below, as are the other smaller categories. But we think a big opportunity both in the African American community that it has a very active cycling culture, and the Hispanic Latino community, which is coming up in income and represents a future market for expansion for the bicycling and for all of the cycling categories. Now, when we get down to a couple of things I want to point out as overviews in the report, this is data that goes to when the road cyclists came to cycling. 54.2% of road cyclists have been cycling for 2 years or more. Now, this is over the last 2 years. So during the pandemic, 2020, 2021, a little over half of road cyclists had been around cycling for a period of time. New cyclists, 18.2% returned to cycling within the last 2 years during the pandemic. 27.6% started cycling within the last 2 years. They had not been cyclists before. Almost 30% of the total adult cycling population during the last 2 years started cycling during that 2-year period. Males, 60.6% of male bike cyclists have been cycling 2 or more years. So these are the ongoing cyclists who have been at it for a while. 16.9% of male road cyclists returned. They'd been out of cycling, hadn't been cycling, came back to cycling during the pandemic, and a whopping 22.5% of male road cyclists started cycling in the last 2 years or during the pandemic. Female, 42.4% of female road cyclists have been cycling for 2 years or more. Good. However, 20.6% of female road cyclists returned to cycling within the last 2 years. They had dropped out and came back to cycling, and a whopping 37%, almost 40% of female road cyclists started cycling within the last 2 years. 37%. So strategically, huge issue. How do we hold on to them? How do we keep both of these groups? The 18.2% who returned to cycling of adults in the last 2 years, how do we keep them cycling? And the 27.6%, almost 30% of all adult cyclists in the last 2 years started in the last 2 years. And of course, this study gets into why. I know that I have thought as an analyst, well, a lot of them were trying to social distance. What you're going to find when you get into the data is social distancing was one of the least important reasons as to why adult cyclists returned in the last 2 years and why they started in the last 2 years. And a couple other factoids just for consideration. This goes to strategic planning, but I want to throw them out there while you had this audience to look at it. The average amount road cyclists spent on their most recent purchases in the last 2 years is $915. Now, this is across all segments of retail, from the direct to consumer to the Walmarts and Targets, all the way up to the bike shop. This study breaks each of those retail categories, breaks them down so that you can see the average amount spent in a bike shop, the average amount spent for road cyclists, how much they spend on accessories. Gives you a pretty good profile of the spend. Overall, most road cyclists plan to purchase a bike in 2 years. Strategic question: how do bike shops attract the bulk of that? A third of road cyclists expect to purchase from a specialty retailer. What about the other 2/3? Overall, as I said, 30% of road cyclists plan to purchase an e-bike in 2 years. Think about that statement. Overall, 30% of road cyclists today plan to purchase an e-bike in the next 2 years. Very important from a planning and a marketing standpoint. I'm going to tighten this up as we move forward. We got 2 more segments to burn through, and we're at the bottom of the hour. Mountain cyclists, 58% of MTB riders are male. The mean age is 37, a little younger. And the majority are between 25 and 54, again, falling into the millennial and Gen X categories. The mean household income of MTB riders lower at $79,000 per year. 45.2% of MTB riders have a college degree or higher, again, above the national average. The majority, 77.6%, are Caucasian. And again, the supplier report for the associate members of the NBDA, or the suppliers out there, mountain cyclists, is over 30 pages of detailed data, including this data on demographics, which again, these charts and tables are exclusive to the NBDA Bike Shop report. So this is exclusive to retailers. Now, whether the suppliers do this kind of analysis in-house, I would suggest they do. However, this analysis is for bike shops. So for MTB, mountain bike off-road cyclists, in the last 2 years, 58.2% male, 40.9% female. The over-index 9.3%, the under-index 10.2%. Again, that same opportunity presents itself. From an age group standpoint, the over-index for MTB or off-road is highest among your 25 to 34 and 35 to 44, which is good. It is lowest after 55. So mountain biking or off-road riding is not for the 55 and older portion of the population. The mean average age, 37, the United States, 38.5, it skews younger. Income. The household income at $79,500 compared to the national average of $63,214 is over-indexed by $16,000. Again, like the road cyclist, some of this is in the 100,000 plus, but this is not the biggest over-index piece. The biggest over-index is in the 25,000 to 49,999. This indicates that the off-road cyclist is lower income than the typical road cyclist. And so this, again, from a planning standpoint, needs to be taken into account in doing the strategic planning, which we cover in the document. College education remains high. We're dealing with 30.9% college grads and 14.3% post-grads against 33.4% nationally, an over-index of the combined total of 11.8%. Remember, educational attainment begets education, or I'm sorry, income, and income in turn is the amount of expendable and interest in activities like cycling. Ethnicity. For off-road, the white Caucasian population is 77.6%. Among the national cycling community, adult cycling community, it was 60.1%. An over-index for MTB of 17.5%. The African-American population is fairly close, under-indexed again across the Hispanic and Latino population and the other populations of the country. Slight over-index for the American Indian and the Native Alaskan community. And in turn, you can compare that to what we show in all the demographic data between all adult cyclists and then the US population. So for mountain cyclists, 50.1% of MTB cyclists have been cycling for 2 or more years, about half. 21.7% returned to cycling in the last 2 years, and 28.2% started cycling within the last 2 years. For males, 54% of male MTB cyclists have been cycling for 2 years or more. 22.7% returned to cycling during the pandemic. 23.3% started cycling during the pandemic, and they chose off-road. For the females that we measured in the study, 44.7% of adult women were cycling before the pandemic hit. Less than half. 19.8% of female MTB cyclists returned to cycling within the last 2 years, took it up again, and 35.5% of female MTB cyclists started cycling within the last 2 years. Additional factoids for consideration, and what we've been looking at to develop the profiles and the strategies that are contained in the document. And I'm going to move ahead here with I actually work from a script, believe it or not. Half of MTB cyclists ride multiple times a week. And you could look at the frequency for all segments as to how often they ride. About 40% of MTB riders take their bike to a local bike shop for service. You could also look at that for the road cyclist. We could look at it for the e-bike cyclist. Half of MTB cyclists consider cycling to be one of their favorite things to do. Extremely important from the standpoint of the future. And over a quarter of MTB riders reported that weather kept them from riding more often. I consider this to be extremely important. I won't go off on it right now, but in the era of global warming, it's extremely important to look at this factor and determine how bike shops strategically can deal with the impact of global warming on their cyclists and cycling community and frequency of cycling, and how they strategically and tactically plan for that. Now, we're moving on to e-bike cyclists. And 64% of e-bike cyclists are male, very high index. The mean age is 37. So we're looking at over half, 63%, that are falling into the millennial and Gen X population. The mean income is, look at this, $106,360. This is the largest that I've ever seen in doing consumer research and looking at consumer research from 1970 forward. $106,360 average household income for an e-bike rider, an adult e-bike rider. 69.3% of e-bikers have at least a college education. Again, you look at the index. 78.3% of e-bike cyclists are Caucasian. And the supplier version of this report, again, issues 30 pages of data. When you look at the male-female gender side of this, males are 64.5% or 15.6% over-indexed, while females, surprisingly, are under-indexed by the same percentage. 35.5% of e-bike cyclists 18 years of age or older are women. So again, a factor to be looked at from a strategic standpoint, particularly for bike shops, but more importantly, long pull for the whole of the NBDA and for the community. By age group, over indexes 25 to 34, a huge over index for 35 to 44 at 21.9%, under indexed from 55 and over. Now, we've been led to believe that the bulk of e-bike purchases are older people. And yeah, there's a lot of them. But compared to the US population, they under index from age 55 and forward, with the largest under indexing at 14% in the 65 plus population. The greatest growth in e-bike from 2018 forward has been in the 35 to 44 population of the country. Income. Here again, 106,360. That's an over-index to the national average of $43,146, an over-index of $43,000, which is huge. So definitely e-bikes are going to the upper income portion of the population. You could take a look at that compared to all cyclists at 88,900 in the table below. And let me just show you that. This is the national at 88.9, e-bikes at 106,360 per household, above the national at 63,000. E-bike education, over-indexed for college and better at 35.9%. So this again goes to the education attainment begets household income, begets ability to spend. Ethnicity, 78.3%, as we said early on in introducing this, and 18.2% over index for the Caucasian population, African-American population is fairly close at an over-index, a slight over-index at 2.7. The big under-index is in the Hispanic Latino population, where again, incomes are rising. I think you have to look very carefully at that portion of the population for potential market and make sure that you're more inclusive relative to strategic planning. Now, 49.3% of e-bike cyclists have been cycling 2 or more years. They came to e-bikes from other forms of cycling. 16.9%, 17% returned to cycling over the last 2 years. And 31% of all e-bike adult cyclists in this country started cycling within the last 2 years. A third started cycling over the last 2 years during the pandemic. 52.1% of male e-bike cyclists have been cycling 2 or more years. So that means that they came from cycling an acoustic bike to e-bikes. 16.7% of males returned to cycling during the pandemic, and 31.2% took it up from scratch. So this almost matches what we see in the overall combined statistics. Female, again, huge opportunity with 43.9% of e-bike cyclists having been cyclists previously coming to e-bikes from acoustic bikes. 17.1% of female cyclists returned to cycling within the last 2 years, and 39% of female e-bike cyclists, adults 18 and older, started cycling within the last 2 years. Again, we think a huge opportunity for the bicycle business, more importantly for specialty bike retailers. Some factoids. The majority of e-bike cyclists purchased a Class 2. Now, there's a whole wealth of information in the study relative to both class and the desire to ride a particular type of bike, of e-bike, I should say. Some of it, as I said early on, goes against conventional wisdom. The example was, we all thought, a lot of us thought, at least I thought, e-bike cyclists were primarily older people that came to cycling and found the e-bike a convenient way to exercise and social distance, etc. The data shows that's not so. Now they're important, but even under index, the over indexes all are in younger populations. Male e-bike cyclists were more likely to purchase a Class 1, while female e-bike cyclists were more likely to purchase a Class 3. This goes to the whole discussion, and you'll see in detail in the study, that what we found in the consumer research was, for e-bike cyclists, 88.4% of female e-bike cyclists stated they would consider a throttle when making a future purchase, while 94.4% of males would consider the same. In other words, would consider a throttle. A key question from the standpoint of type and class, and also the mindset of the American consumer and the trends relative to e-bikes. So again, there's great detail here that's going into the report, great detail that's available to the NBDA associate member supplier side and to the supplier community. We just don't have time to present more than just overviews here and quick thoughts to get you to realize that the detail is there. Cyclist segmentation. Defining segments is an extremely important piece of the study. I covered that in detail in the last webinar, which you in turn can get from the NBDA and download. So it will give you more information in a webinar format, but there's more information contained in the dealer report and also in the supplier reports. But the whole point here is that defining the segmentation is a key part of the cluster analysis. And it's what the folks at Sports Market Surveys really think you need to look at and have available to you to understand how to communicate with each segment and establish what messages will resonate with each segment. And this is true from the sales associate on the sales floor all the way through what you put in social media, up to the brands and their marketing and advertising, which again, this study shows some very interesting realities relative to consumer understanding, attitude, and what they're interested in compared to what we think they're interested in. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, the details in the previous webinar, but the segmentation is 5 parts. The enthusiasts and early adapters, as they're called, and all I'm showing here is the percent of American cyclists. This group is about 10% of all adult cyclists, but it represents 54% of the spend across all of the retail channels, including bike shops. So this is an extremely important segment to understand and look at the detail and match back to what we just went through in the product categories. The number 2 category is the new wave high frequency adult cyclists. Now this is 8% of cyclists, it's 9% of the spend, but it also has demographic possibilities and income possibilities for the future. The diverse new cyclists, extremely important to the future of the American bike business, with 29% of all the cyclists, the adult cyclists, and 13% of the spend currently because of household income, but this is going to grow. So it has to be paid attention to very carefully relative to the generations and the impact they're going to have economically on the purchasing power that comes into bike shops going forward. The family cyclist group, this will skew older in age. The percent of American cyclists is 29%. The percent of the spend, 16. So this is very important to look at. This tends to be, these are the families that cycle together. These are the families that also have children that they're buying cycles for, both acoustic and and also accessories, and taking with them on bike trails. They're worried about, they're interested in facilities. They'll be impacted by the climate change. So again, requiring a lot of strategic thought and how you attract them and bring them into bike shops to spend their family money. And lastly, the seniors, which are called senior exercise and fitness, they represent about 24% of cyclists. So it's a big segment. However, it's now only about 8% of the spend. These are the folks that are buying direct. These are the folks that are buying from mass merchants. While they've certainly got money to spend, that is shrinking, and we have to balance that off relative to the strategic planning. So from a timing standpoint, let me take a look here. Yep, we've probably got a little time for questions. I realize that this is not the biggest audience we've attracted, but in turn, if you're listening to this from the audio standpoint, from the tape standpoint, please be aware that you can contact the NBDA, nbda.com. I'll give you my information in this webinar at the end, and you can certainly contact me and ask any questions that you have. We are in the January 26th webinar as we speak. The next webinar will be February 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern, as indicated by the arrows. And in turn, I do believe NBDA will be announcing that the February 2nd webinar will be open to all members of the bike industry or interested parties. And then we wrap up this educational series with a February 16th roundtable that Keith Storey will be a part of, the lead researcher for this study. And it'll be moderated by Heather Mason, the president of the NBDA, and will allow anybody to ask questions about any aspect of the report, particularly those that have purchased at this point and have looked at the detail. So in summary, we looked at a quick introduction. We covered the methodology. We went into demographics. We looked at product categories and the demographics associated with product categories and some of the factoids in each of the categories in more detail. We made sure that we touched on segmentation and showed you what is in that segment or in that portion of the report, that chapter. That was covered in detail in the previous webinar, which you can also get electronically or get a copy of from the NBDA. We covered the schedule for the educational series that's coming up. And so this takes us to Q&A. And hopefully at that point, I hope we have some questions. If we don't, we certainly will be able to answer any questions that you send our way after you look at the recorded or the electronic version. So Rochelle, did we have anybody from the audience with any questions?
Not just yet. They can put them in the chat or the Q&A section. We can give a couple minutes just in case anyone is typing it out right now. In the meantime, we can put a link to our website where there's more information about the report if anyone here doesn't have it in the chat. I don't see any questions coming in, so
okay, well, my
assume.
information's up, your information's available, nbda.com. Get a hold of either the association or me directly. If there's anything from this webinar you have questions about or anything relative to the report, as you take a look at the information about it and about the purchase of it on the NBDA website.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you everyone for attending today. Have a great afternoon.